And good evening. I'm live. Welcome to anybody in the stream, and I trust you've all had a good day or evening or whatever it is in your local time zone tonight. Right. I'm going to be doing some more pyrography on this particular pussycat this evening. I notice I've got a little bit of a bad connection on this pen. So we may just see about whether or not I can do anything about reducing that problem. These particular connectors are not my favourite connectors for this type of high power application. They're intended for audio purposes, and this is carrying a lot of current, anything up to about 10 amps worth of current. So I don't quite understand the original design philosophy which is using them, but as I don't have a great deal of say in that, I don't want to have to try and rewire or otherwise do a lot of work on all the pens. Generally speaking, it works okay, but it is what I would consider one of the slight downsides of this particular pyrographic controller. In that, in their choice of sockets, I don't actually know the technical specification for these sockets as to what their current carrying capacity is, but I generally know them as phono connectors, purpose of which is for audio purposes, but still. Okay, I'm carrying on with this pussycat. After the stream last night, I did actually do a little bit more. I was kind of really intrigued to see whether the look of the image would improve with more a darker colour on it, and it does seem to have quite a lot. I've got some texturing that I need to do some work on a little bit and see if I can just smooth out some of the texturing. There's some sort of very odd marks around here. I've got some more colouring to do just in this area here, and I think probably around here. Then we've got the ears and the body and the white section, so more around the nose to do. It's quite a bit actually, so we shall just get on with it this evening. Now it's quite dark down here, it's quite relatively lighter up here. I need to transition somewhere as I go through this from the darker area to the lighter area. I don't want to be making everything as dark as it is down here. Partly this is a shaded area, and partly that's I won't say it's a mistake, but it was actually darker than I really intended to get it. Even though the card is black and white, it seems to look better when it's not really dark. You still see it as a black and white cat. But we shall press on. Well, not pressing that hard, but anyway. That's just, of course, the saying. Not being particularly rigid with where the end is here of these strokes. I don't, in fact I actually want them to be somewhat ragged. It looks like fur then, you don't see it, it's not like I've outlined the side of the head, so it tends to look again more natural. This is all about, well, the tricks of adding or not being really, what's the word I'm looking for? What I'm trying to say is these add little touches of realism so that the whole picture becomes more believable as an image of an actual CAD as opposed to, say, a cartoon image or something like that. So it's not exactly tricks, it's just things which help with the illusion, for want of a better description, I suppose. But there we go. So I am, as I say, just darkening this down. I'm trying to blend, so I want to go from dark to light. And then I will have to look at correcting some of the textures. In certain lights you see really strong solid lines which I don't want to be there, especially since they're not necessarily in an appropriate place. So if there is anybody on stream who's new to it, good evening. You're looking at an art form called pyrography. It's a relatively old art form, but using new technology to achieve it. It's a Greek or Latin rooted term is pyrography. The translation of which, pyro meaning fire, graphy refers to writing, but generally speaking fire isn't really involved, and actually in a lot of pyrography neither's writing for that matter. But the real or the more useful translation is creating images with heat, often called wood burning. As again I mentioned, there is no fire, there's no burning taking place. We're not actually causing the wood to be burnt. This is more a case of coating the wood with the liquid that's in the fibre of the fibres of the wood which has been cooked, a bit like maple syrup. We are using the heat from the tool to draw the liquid from the fibre. The heat is then cooking it and turning it brown, and it sits on top of the wood. As I mentioned, it's a relatively old art form. I don't know exactly how old. It certainly goes back to the old wooden sailing ships, where sailors would do scrimshaw being a form of pyrography. It's done using a heated needle on ivory. They generally used ivory. Of course, ivory is not a substance which can be used these days or even sold or transported. Bone is and has been used before. Sailors would do this with, as I say, with a needle which they heated in a little spirit burner for safety reasons, and they'd be using a sailmaker's needle because that's the sort of thing that they had on board. And they would be creating some quite amazing images on the ivory. We're using an electrically heated tool here, so no naked flames, no spirit burner, no gas flames or anything like that. So as I mentioned, there's no fire anywhere nearby here. Now I've been doing this for something like, not this particular image, I've been doing pyrography for something like about 200 hours now. Although I don't particularly keep track of it. It's mainly from a piece taking about, these 20 hours, something like that, and I've done about 10 of them. 10 times 20, 200. So it's I am still a relative beginner. I've got a heck of a lot to learn. I'm learning a lot as I go along. I was about to say I'm not aware of any courses teaching this, so I'm sure there possibly is. But a lot, there is some specialist techniques for the use of the tools. But essentially, a lot of the techniques which are used translate from other crafts. Drawing, I'm just using a different type of ink media. Techniques which are used in airbrushing come into this as well, in terms of the way in which the tool is used, and the way in which the tool is used and handled, and the way monochrome images are built up. Being a beginner, I am not as fast as other people. I also will do things. One of the nice things about pyrography is you can build up the colour in layers, which means that you can start lighter than you want and make it darker. So that's a great one for developing the skills of understanding just how much colour to use and how to lay that colour down. You can lay quite strong colours down in one pass, and I am expecting that as my skill develops I will be able to start to do some of that. Not necessarily all the time. Sometimes it is better to build up layers. That can often give you a more deeper looking colour. So a colour that doesn't look just to be sat on the surface, it actually has depth to it. Very much like polished wood tables, for example. They can, when you look at a shine on one of those, you can see, or you appear to be able to see depth in it. And some of that happens as well when you are doing this. If you create multiple layers, there is a depth to the texture or to the colouring that's created, which sometimes you just don't get if you try and do it in one go and just create one dark line. Tilibo, good evening, hello and welcome to the stream. Nice to see you back again. And how are you this fine-ish, sort of fine day? It may well be a beautiful day where you are. Where I am, it's been a somewhat overcast day today and quite cool really. At least compare with the rest of the UK. I am gradually getting round to keeping this piece that I was about to abandon 2 days ago. It seems to be improving as I add more and more colour to it. So it's been given a reprieve, and may actually even make it to being a complete finished piece. Which will be nice, since I don't like throwing materials away and I don't like failing either. I'd like to be able to finish what I started. Thank you very much. As I say, that in itself is quite lucky. Day before yesterday. So on Monday, I was quite prepared on Monday to abandon this, to throw this particular piece away and start again, either with another image or just start again on this particular image. So I'm quite pleased it looks okay to you guys out there, and it's actually improving in my own view as well. I have a line here which I can see. Yeah, you can sort of see it as well, just there, where this. I see it as a line because of the, and I don't see much difference in colour. I just see a line. You guys on stream can see this whole section here as being lighter, and that's interesting. It means I've got to go over it again. I've been over it once, but it looks like it hasn't got gone dark enough. The stream is excellent, or the camera's excellent for picking up this sort of thing, because it's looking from a different angle and it's seeing light reflecting off at a different angle. Then it's picking up these differences quite well. So from one of the things I've kind of discovered in art here is whether or not I actually ever stream it, it's quite useful to have a camera looking at what I'm doing. Yeah, as I turn it around, you can see the colours change. I know the top of the head is somewhat light. I do need to do some more work on that, but as I rotate it around, the reflections change. And that's something which will show up depending on, if I were to put this on a wall, for example, mount it on a wall, depending on where sunlight comes through the window, for example, it will actually show up things like that. So I do have to do something about it. I don't want it to be as prominent. It will be extremely difficult to make it a consistent colour across the whole of the face. Some of what can help doing that is not to actually do blocks, but to do complete rows, almost section. Keep moving across the whole piece until you get to the stopping point, rather than sort of doing blocks. When you do blocks, you do tend to end up with them standing out a little bit. It's really hard not to do it that way, though, and maybe either have to learn to do it the harder way, or have to learn to blend these pieces in better. Generally speaking, I've been able to blend them in. Junior was done exactly the same way. There were blocks that you could see, but with a little work those disappeared. And just a little work blending things together, making sure textures line up. I have some problems around here with that, but again we'll look at that. Okay, that's now looking. Yeah, there is some variation in fur as well and reflections, but the light source in this particular image is from up here. So whilst this light area here is somewhat justified, this area here isn't. It does need to blend with the darker areas. So unfortunately, from the perspective of watching this, you guys need to have patience because there's not a lot of difference as I'm going over this. You might just be able to see the differences in colour tone, and to be honest, I'm only just seeing differences in colour tone. It's only when light's at the correct angle that you actually see quite a significant difference. And I was about to say ow because my thumb was getting hot with the heat off the tip of this tool. It's why you might see me holding it a little bit awkwardly, if you do. Normally I'd hold one of these things really like a pencil, but sometimes I'll tuck my thumb around the back like this and sort of hold it in what's really a slightly awkward position. It's comfortable but slightly awkward, and that is really because heat is tending to come straight up here, and I'm keeping my finger and thumb away from where the heat is really just coming up between them. Sometimes successful, sometimes not, especially, I mean, I'm holding this, unless I hold it purely vertical, then of course the heat comes up. Any movement of air in the room of course also disturbs it, so it's only partially successful, but it allows more comfortable use of the pen for a longer period of time. It's not too bad. If my my fingers, I do go ouch, I'm not actually burning or anything like that. It's just it gets to the level where it moving it means I won't get burnt. As I say, it's not a significant heat. The heat is somewhat like a candle flame. If you put your hand over top of a candle flame, a couple of inches above, it's sort of hot and gets hotter, and you go, well, I'm not leaving it there. You don't actually come away with a burnt hand or anything like that. So, subtle changes of colour around there, and if I just turn it round, you can actually see now it's a section which is darker. Still not quite right, and I haven't gone quite far enough down, but we're getting there, which is nice to see. Well, I can't actually see it too well, which is part of the problem, but we shall use the camera to help me get this right. Now you see me turning the piece around to look at it in the camera, and you might wonder why I don't just turn the piece around so I can see it in the camera and use the tool on it there. The reason being is the texture I'm creating is a groove. It's a V shape, and in doing so, I've coloured one side of the V but not the other. So light is shining off that uncoloured side and bouncing out, and that's why it looks lighter. So I have to turn the piece such that I can get the tool onto this edge here, the uncoloured edge, which is what I'm doing here. But from a canvas perspective, it needs to be the other way to see the light. So I can't actually turn it over and turn it around. So I actually have to do a small amount like this, look at it, and turn it back. I say to the naked eye here, though, I almost can't see the difference. And as I'm adding colour here, I can see a difference, but it's quite difficult to see. It's the sort of thing I can see because I know where I'm doing it and I know what I'm looking for. If I couldn't see the pen, for example, and I was just looking from an outside perspective, I wouldn't really be seeing any change at all. I just wouldn't know where to look or what to look for. So we've done a bit more there, and now, as you can see, we've got a more consistent colour. We've still got some areas, just in this section here, which isn't quite. Still got some lighter marks there, and then I've got to go back over it again. There's a whole large triangle here, which you can see, which doesn't quite match yet. And I can sort of see that. I think actually what it is the texturing isn't quite as rough as the areas around it. It's smoother, and in being smoother, it's reflecting more of the light. So that probably means I've got to make sure I get my pen more vertical in doing this, because that, I think, is tending to create a more deeper texture. just try a little bit and we'll see how that goes, holding it more vertically. I'm actually wishing I had a better light now. Yeah, it's sort of working. Okay, so we shall continue with that. I can see at this angle here, I can sort of see a rougher texture being developed. So that's I just can't see it when I turn the piece around. So I'm kind of working blind. As I'm working with this tool, what the heat is doing as well is just softening the surface. So I said there's a V-groove being created. It's kind of being pushed into the surface more than being cut into the surface. It's not like a knife. It's just the right angled edge of this tool which is pushing in into what is a fairly soft malleable surface once it's heated. Now that's looking a lot better around there, so we can see it's working. And I can now see I can also see the areas which are looking smooth if I look with the piece at this angle. I'm sort of staring that way at the moment, so I can actually see it, which is good. Yeah, I need to come over here. And underneath it. Yep, that's coming along quite nicely. Now previously, just in this area here, there was a change of fur direction, and it's created a line which I need to just be aware of and see if I can actually disguise that line, move the textures around a little bit just to make the lines less prominent. Basically make them disappear from view. Now that's looking a lot more promising. Turn it around. That's good enough to pass. I might do a little bit more. The shading now between this darker area and the lighter area, from your view there, is a lot more a softer transition just by working on this area here. It's odd how the difference in the small amount of difference highlighted this. So I do need to blend it a little bit more. It's quite obviously really dark down here, and it shouldn't be as dark. Sorry, there shouldn't be as much of a contrast, so I do need to soften the edge so we don't look like we've got a hard edge shadow. There's no reason for there to be a hard edge shadow. The reason, what it should be actually is as dark as this all the way around. So I am playing a little bit with the shading. If I go too dark, it doesn't always necessarily look as good. It's just something I found sometimes. The reference picture says black. In practice, that looks black effectively, or as black as I want it to do. This will look effectively black as well, even though it's a brown colour. A little bit of interpretation, and your own brain fills in quite a lot of the differences. Fixing a couple of texture things as I go. There's a couple of really rough texture areas around here and I want to do some work on, because they also will stand out if the light hits them at a particular angle. And all it really is the texture was just cut a bit deep, and it's at slightly cross angle to what it should have been at. So it's just a matter of going over the area again. I say when the wood gets warm like this, it becomes somewhat soft or plasticky, so you can just remold it more or less. Okay, if I darken this area a little bit, I've got a dark area coming off the eye here. I've got a dip and then another dark area. It doesn't quite suit the angles of the face. I'm being a little bit picky, really. I'm now got to decide whether I'm being too picky. I don't think so. I think if I can just smooth the transitions a little bit, I'll be more comfortable with it, even if it's not exactly something which is really visible. Sometimes that softening doesn't really take a lot to do. Still got a slightly hard edge there that I'm seeing, and I think what it is, it's just the way the texture's taken the colouring, and the sort of two effects have lined up. So what I'm going to try and do is just break up that combination. If I can do that, the line will actually vanish. So yeah, that's looking better from my perspective at this end. How are your cats? They're all very well, thank you. All three of them are very well. This fella's been around today. This fella has been telling us this evening that he's never fed as usual, and he's never had any food in his life, and it would be really nice if he could have some. And the third one, which is a female cat, has spent the day trying to sit on my wife's lap, as she usually does. I've forgotten, Tillybug, whether you've said you had animals or not. If so, how are yours doing? If not, okay, that's not a problem. It's not a mandatory action, isn't having animals. I think you are probably seeing as I am doing. There's a curve around there, a little bit sort of pando eye type effect. So I want to try and break up this edge a little bit that's around here. I've got some more work to do in this area, so I'm not so worried about this bit, but just down here where I'm almost okay. So the question is, where is it exactly? It's there, yeah. So I can see. Right. Just a matter probably of just adding a little bit more colour on a sort of a fairly rough outline. Not following any particular line, just adding more or less dots of colour, or just dotting around. There we go. Instantly it starts, you can probably see it started to disappear as that panda eye effect. Very likely, I suspect, having done 2 of them, I don't think my wife is going to let me get away with not doing the 3rd. Got to find a good reference picture though, or pictures to work from. She's sort of a mottled tortoise-shellish cat, so that's going to provide some challenging in the fur. These 2 are, well, this one's a really dark brown, and Junior there is black, so they are relatively easier to do because of that. I want to lose a little bit more colour, probably around here. So, big dog, small dog. Actually, I'm surprised. Yes, you just remind me saying he's sat snoozing by your side. Generally speaking, I have Junior somewhere around. He either sits just to one side there, or lays down behind a monitor that's to my right hand side, but he's generally somewhere around. He's a cat that I describe him as a sociable cat. He wants to be around you, but he's not actually bothered about sort of sitting on you or having any real attention from you. He just wants to be there. Only occasionally will he actually sort of demand attention. Usually he'll actually just come and, well, he does it to me. He'll walk across the desk here and actually try and sit on my knee. And in which case, quite often he'll just settle down then and just lay there, which allows me to get on with other things like this. That's looking better. Okay, so we'll now just move up here and get rid of some of the lighter patches that are making his fur look somewhat crimped. His fur actually is a little bit like that at times, but it doesn't really show up as differences in colour. His fur has a slight wavy texture when you actually look at him. Oh, little. Yeah, yes. Well, I don't know. I've never actually done her in that sort of thing in pyrography, so I don't actually know. It may turn out to be easier from the perspective if you've got small patches with lighter areas in between and they're all different colours. So this thing that I'm doing here, which is sort of filling in, you can see there's a dark area here with a lighter area either side of it, so it's like striped. I now have to sort of work to smooth those out, whereas when I come to do Little Miss, Clio, then because they will be little patches with different colours around them, it may mean I don't have to do that sort of thing. So it could actually work out to be easier to do. But also, I may not be able to use the same technique as I may or may not be able to use the same technique. I quite like this fur effect that I have discovered how to do, but it only works for, I can't use it for white hair. Well, I suppose I could, but I have to be really, it'd have to be a really light colour, because with pyrography all colour is relative. So you're seeing black, not quite as black, so the eyes actually look blacker than you're seeing this fur. You're seeing this area here probably as a yellow or a greenish colour, and this then looks white. But equally, there's an area down here that looks white. So if I go to junior here, you're kind of seeing this area here as white, but this is actually brown. You're seeing it sort of an off-white, perhaps a dirty, shady white, which of course that's the intention. It was to shade it. And you're seeing this which is shaded as white because you're probably comparing it against the background, which isn't. But this actually isn't bare wood. This was coloured in, and there is a colour to it. So it's all relative. So if I wanted to try and do white fur and keep the texture, I probably could. I probably want to practice first, but I probably could do that and just keep like a very light colour on it. Be challenging, but it's a possibility. Or if when I come to do clear, what I may try and do is just do it all using straight shading rather than trying to apply any texture at all. Don't know. It's part of the fun of this is you're looking at something and saying, well, do I want to do it that way, or do I want to do it this way, or sometimes it's just a case of starting and seeing how it's comes about. See where, as I say, see where the piece takes you. Trying now to get this area to take colour. I'm having to move the tool quite slowly over the wood just to try and get it to take a little bit more colour. I don't want to be too regular about it either, because that will just move the problem. Can't start. I'm starting to introduce another line in there. I wonder. Let's see if I can do it with a flat shade rather than using this in like a texture mode. Let's see. I've turned it now flat. I'm trying not to push down on the wood at all. So just brush over the surface of the wood so that I don't flatten the texture down, because if I do that I'll create a flat area, and if I create a flat area it will reflect light and it will look lighter even if it's actually darker, if that doesn't sound too contradictory. That's doing it better than it was laying the texture, so we will just see if we can continue that and blend out the wavy pattern. Sometimes it's just a case of breaking the pattern up, and it's not, you're not actually having to be, to be very accurate about the shading. It's what draws your eye to it quite often is the regularity. So if you just break up that regularity, then what was drawing your eye to it disappears, and you just don't see what it was you were trying to look at. So if there's anybody new in the stream, just welcome. Nice to see you here. If you've got any particular questions about the art form that you're seeing, then feel free to ask them in chat. I'm not an expert at this art form. Whilst I've done about 200 hours, which sounds quite a lot, that's only about 9 or 10 pieces. So I've learned a heck of a lot over that time, and I've got a lot more to learn, but I don't mind trying to answer anybody's questions. I've got a little bit of a black spot there which I'd like to at least have not quite so prominent. Now I don't really want to try and erase it, which I can do using a knife and scraping it. So what I want to try and do is disguise it by just darkening areas around it as well. As I mentioned earlier, making it not stand out. Just thinking, the thing I was saying about breaking up the edges so that you don't see the pattern, that of course is the very reason why the armies and armed forces have camouflage. Same thing, they're breaking up the pattern, the regular pattern, so that you can't actually see what's there. Your eye just doesn't see the shape. It's there. Okay. So I'm using the camera at the moment. I'm doing the same level of hand-eye coordination as you need to use with a graphics tablet on a PC. The only difference is there's actually a very slight delay. I'm looking at my OBS output, capture screen, but there is about a quarter of a second delay, so it's a little bit interesting. Now I've virtually blended what was there away altogether now, so that looks a lot better. I've now got some areas around here, down around here, which I also need to do something with. These are actually probably a bit light. I can see, as I mentioned earlier, the side of the V which isn't quite coloured in well, not properly is the wrong word, but it isn't carrying as much colour as the other side, and therefore is showing up lighter. So just by doing both sides of the V to the same sort of level, you instantly darken the area, and there we go. That doesn't look bad. Still visible a little bit at that sort of angle. Okay, so let's just soften off the edge, which is this one here. Okay, so And the nice thing about this, and about cats, dogs would be the same, I guess, is the fur. Fur isn't actually a perfect colour all the way over. As I mentioned, if you can see the reference picture for Felix here at the bottom left, he looks like a black and white cat. He's actually a really dark brown, or even slightly red. If you were to part his fur, you let you get near enough to do it, and look at it, it actually is sort of more a ginger brown at the roots, and as it comes up, it gets a little bit darker brown, and ultimately when you look at him, from a distance, which is where the photograph's taken, it actually looks black. Whereas Junior, his fur actually is black. And when you see the two side by side, it's relatively noticeable. You can actually see a difference in the colour. Right. How long did the other one take you? Just over a week of streaming. So I think it was 8 days of streaming, which puts it about 16 hours, 16 to 20 hours. Since the stream is somewhere between 2.5 hours. Which seems to be about my average for something this size. I'm perhaps not necessarily the fastest. Obviously speed is a skill as well. It takes time to learn, and to learn just how to deal with colour going down really fast. It's like artists, if you like. There's some artists that'll start with a light pencil and draw a very light sketch, and then make bits of it darker, and keep working on it, making it darker and darker and darker, and then you'll get another artist will come along with a 6B really soft pencil and just sketch first off, and it's just a skill and practice with the media. So I suspect I'm very much the same. I'm really at the starting level, and I haven't yet got the skill to just dive in, or perhaps even the courage to dive in with a really dark colour to start with. Okay. I don't mind some colour change on this as you move around. You're seeing like that sheen or shine as it turns around. You're seeing it goes shiny in some places. That's almost quite natural for a cat. This area here, though, whilst it looks sort of shiny to you on stream, I'm seeing white, the white colour. Again, it's not fully coloured, so that's something which I will be working, or I am working on now. I'm not quite sure which side it is. I need to work on it from. I think it's this side here, so I shall turn it around and we shall see. Yeah, looks like it is. Let's give this tool a bit of a clean. Okay, 20 hours you think is fast? I don't know really, to be honest. I have no experience to compare it against Tilly. The only time, the only time I've seen other people doing this, doing pyrography, or actually doing portrait style or picture style pyrography, has been on YouTube, and generally speaking, it's been done in time lapse, and you've got no idea of the compression of the time lapse. So it can be a 20-minute video, but there's no indication whether that was 20 hours, and you can see the jumps, so you can tell it's been done in a number of sessions because you can see the lighting jumps and things like that. But there's no sort of real indication. I've never seen somebody say, oh, this is a 30-hour thing compressed down into 20 minutes or something like that. So I actually have no comparison to say whether it's fast or slow. The people I've seen on Twitch, Cannon Bear for example, who does a different style of pyrography, he does a different style of pyrography, so again it's difficult to make a comparison. He has he works in a more cartoon style, so it's a different technique and a different style, so I'm not sure. There is another guy that does pyrography on the stream, because I've heard him say that when he's been doing something else, and I've seen the pyro machine in the background of his streams, but I've never actually seen him do any pieces yet. So, and I can't actually recall his name. But so again, I've got no comparison. But if it is fast, then great. But it'll take as long as it takes. I mean, this I've previously been working on A4 sheets. I haven't done too many this size, and an A4 sheet is at least 3 times this size, and whilst I'm not necessarily covering it completely, it makes a difficult sort of comparison, between this, for example, and the bomber, which I think you've seen. I'm not quite sure which. The bomber took about 20 hours, but I think this has got more work in it. But it's still, Junior there still took 20 hours. This one's been about what, four streams plus something. So this one is well up over 10 hours already, and I'm probably about halfway through looking at what's. Because there's all this body to do, which is largely black, and then there's a background, the ears to do as well, and they're somewhat daunting. They were quite difficult on Junior. Didn't turn out so bad in the end in terms of when I actually got on and did it, but it was quite difficult to find the way to start, really. Now, Mr. P3, stop beeping at me. I've got a water-cooled PC, and very occasionally the water flow sensor stops. Don't know why, and then it beeps at me. I know there's plenty of water in there, and whilst it probably could do with changing, there's no actual large particles in there, so it's not jamming, but I think it's just whatever the little board that's reading the sensor just forgets to send its values sometimes, and so the main controller lets me know. I probably should change the sensor on the sensor board, but never quite got around to that. I did stop it shutting my PC down, because the facility is meant to be there as a failsafe in case the pump stops, of course. Shut the PC down so you don't overheat the CPU. But if you've got a faulty sensor, that's not actually a good idea. Twice on the stream tonight I've heard the beep, which would have been an automatic shutdown if I got it turned on. But not made a really good stream. I'm kind of lucky I can do things like this for hours on end without actually getting bored with them. As long as I'm actually making some form of progress with it, then and I'm actually seeing a result, then I don't actually get bored tilly with it. I guess if it was really slow, then I might. The other thing though that changes the dynamics of this is actually talking to you guys on the stream, because if it was boring, then talking to you guys, it creates an interest factor where I don't notice what I'm doing. So but I know sort of just from past history that, as I say, as long as I can visibly see progress being made, then I can do. The boredom factor doesn't come into it for me. I guess it might come into it for you guys watching it, because you probably are not really seeing a great deal of change here with when I'm doing this. Yes, I will admit it's. I can see it, but it's subtle to me, as I mentioned earlier. This area is providing me with a challenge that you get on a lot of wood, where an area of the wood just is reluctant to take more than just a light colour. And it just becomes a little bit of an exercise in just how slowly do I have to move this, and being careful not to create dark blobs at the ends or the starts of the movement of the pen. And sometimes that happens whether you like it or not, especially if you're going past an area which is already dark. It kind of extends the dark area. It's a bit difficult to sort of explain, but if you kind of imagine it like there's a dark drop of paint, as you go past it you drag that drop of paint out a little bit and the dark area extends, and even if you don't want it to, you can end up creating like little streaks, which at the end have to go back over and mitigate, but all part of the fun of doing this particular art form. Kind of think if everything was so easy that you know was like people think computer art is, just click your fingers and it's done for you, then it would be boring and I wouldn't be interested in doing it. And then goes my PC again beeping. Maybe when we get a bit warmer weather, for no other reason than I'm procrastinating, then I may have to drain my PC down and just give the loop a good clean out. Only problem with that is it may last longer than a day, and I may not be able to come on stream then. And that's getting a bit warm. Okay, that's colouring in a little bit. It looks a lot better than it did. And I'm quite amazed. It's having a real impact. Is some of this on the face? It looked. All I've really done on this from the other day when I was all for throwing it away was just darken the fur down. Okay, no problem, Tilly. you disappear as you wish, not a problem. Right, I shall just carry on darkening the fur, and I will tell everybody that may be left about pyrography and a little bit about the way I'm doing it and the tools that I'm using. You've probably heard it all before, so you certainly won't be missing anything. So as you heard there, pyrography is what you're looking at. Generally taken as meaning creating images with heat. It does get called burning wood, or wood burning, but we actually are not burning the wood at all. We're not. The heat in this tool is really insufficient to burn the wood, or even to get it close. I can just about carbonise it. Certainly with the setting on the tool as it is at the moment, I could turn it up quite considerably, and that would get to the burnt stage quite a lot, but I'm unlikely to ever get it hot enough to actually cause flames to appear. So it's not exactly burning, which most people would understand with a flame. I am using here a pyrographic machine, the purpose of which is to actually convert mains electricity down to a safe low voltage, which is then fed to the tip of here, and the current flow is what is actually through the tip is what is actually heating the tip up. So really the only heat in this whole machine is right here at the tip. Not in the wires, although it does conduct up the wires, and it's not coming from anywhere else. There is no heater cartridge or anything in the body of this pen. It is purely just two wires running up the body, which is open, and free air is allowed to pass through it, which helps keep the body cool. So I mentioned it's a safe voltage. Whilst this is plugged into the mains, which in the UK is nominally 240 volts AC, the actual tip, or at these 2 points here, the voltage, I don't know the exact voltage for this machine, I must look it up, but 1.5 to 3 volts, almost all machines operate in that range. So it's very safe to touch. That's the equivalent of 1 or 2 torch batteries, AA batteries, and as you may be familiar with, you don't get an electric shock off of those, and I wouldn't get an electric shock off of these either. I'm not about to touch it not because of the electricity, but because of the heat. Otherwise, if I had a tip without, if I had a tool with it didn't have a tip in it, then I'd be quite happy to plug it in and show you. But these heat up really quickly in a matter of seconds. So this as soon as I switch it on, this tool is hot and conducting heat a little bit up here, and I literally don't want to burn myself. And so whilst I wouldn't set fire to wood, it is actually hot enough to make paper disappear fairly quickly. Again, not quite hot enough to set it on fire, but it would be hot enough to certainly raise a blister on my hands, and if not quite a bad burn. So I am just avoiding touching it. Kind of a sensible precaution, really. It's an art form which has been around for a good many years. Where exactly it started, I don't know. There's perhaps an interesting history behind pyrography, I'm not sure. But I am aware that it's an art form under a different name, generally called scrimshaw, I believe. That was practiced by sailors on the old wood tall ships, where they used to use ivory as their material, and they would make a black lines using a heated sailmaker needle, and they'd heat the needle up in a little spirit burner. They didn't like, of course, just general open flames on ships. And then they decorate ivory, either raw ivory or carved ivory. Of course, ivory these days is a substance that effectively cannot be traded and cannot be transported. So that's it's not a material that's used these days at all. Bone is sometimes used, although I understand it smells somewhat when you try and do it. Leather can be used as well as a material for pyrography. Quite often writing is done on leather more than images, but images can be done. It is also possible to do this on material on sort of thin or ideally thick card or paper, and I mean really heavyweight paper, not photocopy paper that just basically disintegrates when you try. If you're really good, I'm assuming that you can probably get it 1 or 2 shades on photocopy paper or printer paper, but you leave the tool on it just a fraction of a second too long and you've burnt through the paper. And I say burnt, there's no flame, just the heat carbonizes the paper and it just disintegrates into a pile of ash. But something like wallpaper, for example, can be used quite successfully. Generally speaking, it's not particularly white, but it's a brownish colour because they tend not to use the bleaches to make the paper white for that purpose, because it's not going to be visible. But here I'm using birch plywood. I'm using birch because it's a light wood. And the lightness of it means I have more of a range of shades of brown to work with. The darker the wood, the less effective shades that you have. You might imagine if I take a wood like ebony, which is really black, then I don't, something which is this colour wouldn't show up because ebony is darker than this. The eyes probably wouldn't show up because ebony is darker than those, so you can imagine the actual range of colour is possibly 1 shade if I'm really lucky on ebony. If I take a hardboard which is sort of a little bit lighter than this area here, then obviously I can go darker and as dark as the eye, so I can get 4, maybe 5 shades. So the lighter the wood, the more flexibility or the more range of shades that you can put into the piece. Now using plywood, this is a 3-ply plywood and it's relatively thin. I think this is 4mm thick, 3mm, something like that. As you heat wood, and especially the surface here, I am shrinking the wood fibres as I work on them. That's why the liquid is, because the liquid's coming out of them, they shrink, and it's the liquid which is getting cooked and turned brown. What's happening is it creates a tension on the wood which would tend to make it bow upwards. But being plywood, the way the construction of the plywood means that it actually resists that flexing force, and while this one is very slightly bowed, it's not particularly significant. If this was just a single ply, it would probably be quite extensively bowed. I do have some poplar, which is a new, I was aware of the wood but never really found it as a plywood before now, but I have found a supplier of poplar plywood, which is really high grade plywood. Plywood is graded. It has grading letters that tell you how pure, or how clean is the word that's got used. The surface is. Does it have knots or repairs in it? And the poplar I've got is graded AB, I think it is, or possibly AA, which is the AA would be the highest grade available. And AB is one side's perfect, the other side is almost. This birch plywood I'm using here is BB grade, so it's a little bit down. It means it can have some knots in it, for example, but they're not significant, and they are firmly in the wood. So I'm actually looking forward to it, because the poplar's even whiter than this. So the next time I do pyrography, I probably will be trying a piece on that poplar, and we'll see just how good it is. Lizard Soul, good evening. Lizard Soul 87, good evening. Yes, you're correct. It is indeed razor tip. It's the dual station, so it's the SSD10. You would appear to be familiar with them, especially if you were able to recognise it from the pen. Or have you watched some earlier streams where I've mentioned it? Well, I've never used any other machines, so a comparison with them is difficult, but I enjoy using this one. I'm not particularly a fan of this style of connector, but that's so far it's worked reasonably well. So, but that's probably about the only thing which I have had any concerns over so far with the machine. I do like the fixed tips that are available on this though, so that was one of the reasons why I particularly chose this one. And William, hello, good evening. Oh, you've got one as well. Then you should be getting it out and trying some work, Lizard Soul, perhaps even on stream, so we can all see some more pyrography in action. How did you find using it? What sort of things were you using it to create? Lizard Soul. Okay. Well, I encourage you to think. I'm going to say encourage you to think faster and actually try it out. But only if you're comfortable. Yeah. Okay. That can be kind of a problem. What sort of? Well, okay. I guess I'm lucky. I don't actually pay for bandwidth, so I don't have any caps on my bandwidth. So I am lucky. I've got something like a 7 meg upload rate here, and I don't have any caps. So if you do have caps, then it is something you need to obviously have to consider carefully. But in terms of speed, what sort of speed do you have? Oh, mostly calligraphy. Okay. That's interesting. The dotting. Yeah, that's also a valid thing. Dot techniques. Is called... Oh, it's one of those things that I know. And it's there in the front of my mind, but I just can't put a word to it, and it'll bug me for a little bit. Half toning is the technical name. Half toning. Different sizes of dots, different distances between them creates the shade of monochrome colour that you're after. But it's certainly a valid technique to use. It's an interesting one as well, because that takes quite a bit of skill to get the colour that you're after from placing those dots. So that'd be an interesting thing to see done. It's not something I've tried. It's not something I've tried in pyrography terms. I'm not actually sure I'd be that good at it. So if you are able to produce pictures or portraits using that technique, then yeah. Oh, I know, there are times where you just have to go, well, I can't think of it, so. Okay, well, they're interesting. For some reason, I seem to do a lot of cats. That's partly, I guess, because there's been a lot of cats around, but to have photographs of and things. But other animals as well. The geckos are an interesting animal to do. Yeah, I'd kind of love to see that sort of thing. Oh, I guess if you've been doing, you'll probably have something like, it says being careful with the wire like this, perhaps, or if you got the ball tips ones for writing. This one is off, yes. This is a tip I tend to use for writing with rather than the ball tips, but I don't actually have any ball tips, and I don't generally do a lot of writing, so this tends to do a dual purpose. But to be honest, I got this for shading. I've always used a spoon shader, and I kind of wanted something, but this kind of creates a dark line with a wider, lighter line around it, and it's not bad to fill in large areas of space, as long as you're quite consistent in your movements with it. As you go across, you get a dark and a light, and then you go over the lighter area with the base of the spoon, and you kind of move the light area up as you go, if you see what I mean. But I kind of wanted something that I could do a fairly broad line with, so I got a couple of different of these flat shaders, and to be honest, now that and I got just the tips rather than a fixed pen, because they're cheaper, to try, and if I didn't like them, then I wouldn't have spent as much money as a fixed pen. But since I started using this shader, I've used nothing else. I literally have used nothing else. This has got used for everything so far. It's giving me, well, I'm using it like a knife here, creating texture, shading with it. I can use it a little bit like a writing or a sort of a flat tip by angling it over upside down basically, and using the end. It's proven to be extremely versatile, so at some point I'm going to order a fixed version, because I prefer the fixed versions. They're easier just to unplug than to start messing about trying to change the tips on. But yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. The interchangeable tips is why I go it. I got it for that sort of purpose of, like you said, for I mean, that's a wire tip that I bought, but equally well I could have just, to give you the wire, so I could have just folded one of those myself, and that's kind of reason why I did get I got one of these, and I can't actually remember why I've got two, which is odd. I probably had a reason at the time why I got two. I'm not sure. Isn't that weird? Probably one came with. It was probably something like one came with the actual the machine, and I forgot or didn't realise, and I bought another one. But it gets used. This one basically has that tip in it all the time. I never change it. So that just got getting used like that. But I think some of these flattened stuff is quite interesting to use. And guides, yeah. There's some So I've been looking for a long time. I haven't really found much. Well, it's probably my style of looking of things that I look for. I've seen quite a few videos and websites where they go, this is how you do it. So this is how you create cat fur. And they'll have, I don't know, they'll have a tip. They'll be doing it with, I'm just making this up, a tip like this. This is how you create cat fur. You do this. And they're doing it on pine, for example. And so I've got a tip that looks like this. I'm doing it on birch, which is a different wood, and I go, well, okay, if I believe you that that's how you do it on pine with that tool, well, I've got a different tool, so how do I do it? I don't want to have to go out and buy the specialist tool or something like that, so I look for videos where, why have I got a piece of wire here? I look for videos where they actually explain why they're doing something. I seem to have a that's the resistance wire for the things. I seem to have a piece just loose for some reason. It's probably dropped out of one of the cases. Yeah, I actually prefer this. I mean, to change this tip, turn it off, let it go cold. Okay, that's about 30 seconds. Get a screwdriver, unscrew that, get another one in. That's me, I do that. I've changed the tips. This one's now hot. That's that's why I like these pens. There are some where they're permanently wired in are the pens, and you change the tips. But I like that. That's fantastic. Take that one out. Put this one in. Yeah, this one's now hot, and I can use it. And equally, I can just put that down and go back to my other one. That's why I like this. I do not like this style of connector for the fact this is a 10 amp current supplying, or up to 10 amp current supplying through it. These are audio connectors. They're meant for milliamps, not amps, really. Okay, they are, they probably are rated as well, but they can be quite, especially the center connector, right inside the end there. You won't be able to see it, but inside there is a shroud that grasps this this center connector, and after a while I do notice that gets a little bit loose, so I end up with either a little tiny jeweler screwdriver or something like a scalpel blade, and pushing it in and just squeezing the center circular. It's just like a couple of it's just like a piece of metal that's just bent in a circle, so you can get the screwdriver just under the edges where they come together and just bend it in slightly, which then makes a better connection like that. But that's the only thing I don't really fantastically like about these. But that speed of change. Okay, no problem. You can disappear anytime you like. Yeah, I'll carry on talking, but yeah, experimenting, yeah. If you let me know when you're back, I can comment. But if anybody else is watching, yeah, the sockets do loosen up, but they're not that difficult to tighten up. Just takes a small screwdriver, or as I mentioned, a scalpel, and probably a good light. But that is sufficient enough to tighten this up. I've done it twice now on this pen. In fact, I did it just tonight on one. You can tell with these machines when you've got that problem anyway, so because there's an LED on the face of the machine, and if you just sort of waggle the connector, you can see the LED changes brightness, and that's an indication that there's not quite a good connection. So it's then just a case of just tightening up that. So Yeah, and I've changed this pen hundreds of times, so it's not something that concerns me overly. And ultimately, if that means I have to buy a new pen, I'm not sure. I suspect the manufacturer may repair them. I'm not sure. Tillybug, welcome back. Nice to see you back. Thank you for joining me again. I'm glad that I am entertaining enough for you to want to come back. Dear. So I've done most of the head, or at least to the level that I want to do here, at least for the moment. I've taken away the white looking area. It now looks slightly lighter, but that's okay because of the light angles. I'm quite happy with that, and you can see it changes a little bit just depending on the exact angle the light's bouncing off of it here. So I've now got to work a little bit down the nose. We've got some of the white areas down there. It's kind of salt and pepper as well, so I want to do a little bit of work just around the nose. This bit area here, I might leave down here as it is. I describe it as salt and pepper. There's white and dark fur intermingled, and so you can sort of see that as it stands at the moment. Just the way it's a total accident, but just the way in which the colour has been laid down. I've got that sort of mixed white and black, and you can sort of see white lines in the piece here, which has just sort of suited that quite nicely. So I might just leave those alone, but I do want to darken this area around here. It certainly looks at the moment too light, especially around here, around the eye. That's just not quite right. And some really strong texturing here, really deep texturing, and that also doesn't look very good, because a cat's nose, the hair on it is extremely fine, extremely short, and is laid flat, so it's really silky. Just like on a dog's nose, Tilly. So you'll be familiar with that as well if you stroke the nose area, then, or the muzzle, I guess, isn't it? But more towards the tip of a dog than up near their eyes. But on a cat, the whole area is like that. So I want to darken this down. I may do a little bit of, may put a little bit in there. It's a bit too much of a sharp edge as well, so I want to sort of roughen it off a little bit like the other edges. But first of all, I'm just making it darker. Okay. Yeah, a lot of animals are. I think that obviously the nose is quite sensitive to them, and you're also getting quite close to their eyes as well. And obviously their eyes are important to them, so they tend to be a little bit wary of you being that close. I know, our cats have kind of all got used to it, because, as you know, like the dogs, they love the heads. Well, most of them like the head stroked, and you just gradually sort of work your way down the front of the face over many months. I kind of have done it on purpose, so that as with the cats especially, sometimes you'll get, same as we do, the sleep dust, that the sort of matter that collects in the corner of your eyes. It happens on the cats as well, and we kind of will use your finger to get it out, and especially because sometimes it irritates the cats and they're pawing at their eyes because it won't come out, and but they won't normally let you go anywhere near their eyes. But gradually, if you just work your way slowly they'll let you do it. You just do it once or twice, and then an hour later you do it again, and gradually you can work up to it and rub the noses. Junior is a bit odd because he loves the bottom end of his nose rubbed. He always has. If you go up towards the bridge of his nose, between his eyes, he used to bite you. But if you just got down the tip, he'd almost go cross-eyed, and that sort of look that they put on that goes, they're in some sort of heaven. Okay, well that darkened off quite nicely. Let's carry on down. And then we'll see if we can get rid of some of this really rough texture. It's bugging me to see it, so not that sure it particularly shows up at any sort of distance or even on stream. Yeah, it just looks nice, fairly nicely black. The nose areas, there's something. It's an area I'm not 100% happy with on this particular piece, but either I'll see if it fixes itself, or I'm about to try and say it's good enough, but that's not right. I am content enough with it for it to leave it as it is. If it doesn't get any better, it's not bugging me enough to actually throw the piece out. It is of sufficient quality. I just would prefer it to be of greater quality. I think it's the way to describe the feeling I have about it. Okay, what I'm trying to do here is really, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, the wood becomes sort of soft and plasticky when heat's applied. Well, a certain level of heat is applied, so I'm just kind of using that to push the texture that's there around a little bit, so it's kind of squash into the deep grooves and cut some more into the slightly higher sections, so I actually get just finer texturing rather than erasing it or cutting it deeper. And whilst I'm applying, relatively speaking, quite a bit of heat by keeping the thing in one place for quite a long time, the only effect of that is to make this area of colour go darker, and the nose is black, so that's not a particularly significant concern. Good evening, welcome back again, Lizard. So I don't know if you caught the bit about the socket. You're right, they do, or this one has. My other pens are fine actually, but this one I did notice the socket was loose-ish. So I was getting variable heating really with off the tip of the pen, and I noticed movement would cause the LED on the front of the machine to flicker. But it's the inside of the socket here is kind of like that. There's a slight gap, and there's a ring of metal, which is what grasps that centre pin. With a reasonably bright light, you can or something like a jeweler's screwdriver or a scalpel blade, say scalpel blade or a modelling knife, you can push it down between the plastic and this bit of metal and bend it in slightly on both sides, and so instead of it being totally round, if you like, it goes slightly oval, and then when you push the plug in, it actually grips it really solid. And whilst I've done that twice on this particular pen, once a long time ago and once actually just tonight, that's been enough to just hold it. It's really solid and it's a really good connection. I've not had I've had the problem with this other one as well. Same style of pen. It actually caused me when I first started streaming to change the pens over, and this one was exactly the same. I just needed to bend it, and this one was okay, but all the other pens I've got I don't have a problem with and never have. But it's a fairly easy one to fix, and I'm assuming it's not going to come back any time often, so I wouldn't let that worry you too much. From the point of view of one of the advantages of this machine that you've got is changing these tips is really easy, or changing the pens is really easy. I know the pens are a bit pricey, but you saw how quickly I switched 3 pens, and I've got a knife blade under here, I've got the writing tip over there. Within 10 seconds I can have gone through all 5 blades, all 5 pens, and that's the advantage. I think of this, one of the great advantages of this machine is that you can change things that quickly. You just want to do, get a ball tip, for example, to just outline that, then you do that. Whereas if you have to spend 10 minutes changing this tip, I'd be going, I'll tell you what, I'll leave that later. I'll leave that you end up sort of leaving bits and pieces, and you can't work on a whole piece in one go from that perspective. So yeah, that's all it is, just to show the contact. I mean, ultimately, I guess, with any contact, they're all rated. All plugs and sockets are rated for the number of insertions. I don't know what phono sockets are rated for. I literally have no idea. I mean, I could guess at 5,000-10,000, something like that, which is still a heck of a lot of changes. I mean, I've had this unplugged more times, showing people on stream that you can unplug it than I did since I connected the pen. I kind of only use 2 or 3 pens, so I'm not changing. And this being a dual machine, I've got 2 plugged in all the time anyway. So. But it's just an electrical connection. I'm not sure whether razor tip will repair pins, but if after 5 years it needs replacing, well, I've had 5 years of use out of it, so I'm not quite even sure how the pen is constructed. I'm assuming they're just pushed in somehow, so it may be possible for me just to pull this out and fix it myself, just swap the connector out if necessary, but I kind of have the skill to do it, but not necessarily the desire. As I say, if I've used a pen like this for 5 years and it's worked perfectly for 5 years, if I have to go out and buy a new one, I don't look on it unfavourably, shall we say. Plus I do prefer the fixed tip pens anyway. I mean, if I don't have this screwed up quite tight enough, then I've got increased resistance, so this doesn't get as hot, but it gets hot there. And you possibly have found on your machine sometimes you'll feel the plug is a bit warm, again because of the resistance. So that's one of the reasons why I like this machine, because you've got the fixed tip pens that you can buy just about every other machine. They just give you just have screw tips like this. Granted, the tips are cheaper. But this is a pen. If this was a fixed tip, it'd be a pen that I use virtually all the time. So it's kind of like an investment. I don't have any resistance problems here. You know, they're silver soldered, I think, so I know they're a good contact. So, but that's just my philosophy. Yeah, yours or other people's may well be different. Okay, I am just trying to reduce what is quite a coarse texture here on the nose. I've messed about with this nose quite a lot over the past few days. It didn't look right back then. It sort of looks a bit right now, but the texture really is as you may know, on a cat or a dog, the nose area, especially towards the tip, is a really smooth, silky area, little tiny hairs, and the great big textures I've got on here just aren't really in keeping with it. It looks odd because of that, so I am just doing some work here to just try and use the plasticity, there's a big word for you, the plasticity of the wood when it's heated to just rework the texture a little bit. And I should slow down, not speed up, which is what I was doing then. I have a tendency, especially when I'm talking, to speed up, and here I need to slow down using this tool. Because I need quite a bit of heat in this area. Interesting, you should do calligraphy though, so that's something which I can see being quite an interesting one. I've kind of tried writing with it, and I have to. So I've tried writing, so that's not calligraphy as such, but a cursive style of writing. I do have to sort of, put it down in pencil first and follow it, and it's then just, well, you've seen the size of the tip. It's fairly thin writing. I've not actually tried any true calligraphy style with it yet, so that would be something interesting to see. I love seeing new techniques and new ideas, because it's kind of, seeing how somebody else does something, like you, for example, doing calligraphy, because it just throws ideas into you, or it throws ideas into my mind about what I can do or where I can try that out and things like that. So I love seeing new stuff. Even better if you explain how or why you're doing it as you go along. I wonder if I can sort of iron this a little bit. So I use the shader a little bit flatter, and therefore sort of squash it down. I don't mind if it goes slightly shiny, which it will do, because, as I say, the nose is really sort of silky and shiny. I have got a little bit of a curve here, and it looks a little bit as though the nose is bent, so I think I may have to just work the edge a little bit to straighten it out. Not sure the best way of doing that. This way maybe. I still need to roughen up that edge a little bit. Fur very rarely has got a dead straight edge on it. It tends to be slightly rough like this. The straightest edge is when when the line is in line with the fur, but even then, as you can see on the well, you might say it's probably a bit small to see on the reference image, but if you look at any sort of cat, even where the fur changes colour along the direction of the fur, you still get bits that stick out to one side. So if you see a dead straight line like this, it's kind of not particularly accurate. whether it's necessarily visible to somebody who isn't, doesn't exactly know what they're looking for, then I'm not sure. It could be just something that I'm aware of because I know it shouldn't look like that. And artists do tend to be somewhat their own worst critic. William, if you're still around, have you seen 3D this week? I don't actually recall seeing him. Well, he didn't seem to stream last night. I don't recall. I think he was streamed on Monday, but I'm just haven't seen him for a while. I usually sort of see him around in a stream or two during the day, but I don't recall actually seeing him. Yeah, pine does that strong veining is. Let's have a look. Sorry, you said you said a real lot, and I wasn't really paying enough attention. Yeah, I kind of did that as well. I having got a set of pens that I like, I thought, I want to try a flat shader, just see if it, because it looks like it could be useful, and so I got a few. I can't remember if it was an actual set or whether it might have been, because the probably was. They came on a card, so. But there again, this could have just been the way the supplier put them together. So there's a spear shader in here, and there's a more of a wider flat shader, and this is sort of a medium one, I guess. So I've kind of got three flat shaders and one spear shader. Oh, that made me jump a little bit, Mr. Profrisk. Thank you very much for following. That's very kind of you. I'm glad that the stream was entertaining enough for you to want to follow and hopefully come back. So yeah, I haven't got a ball tip yet. I'm not that sure I do enough writing for me to have purchased one, but there you go, Mr. Profrisk. You are immortalised until the next person follows this evening, or until the end of the stream, whichever comes first. Yeah, it takes a bit of practice, and if you're on Pine, as you have already gathered, it's that veining is challenging, shall we say, doesn't it? Because the vein itself, the ring doesn't shrink away as much as the pine does in between, and you end up with like ridges, don't you, afterwards. You must be, well, I guess for pyrography you are making it really dark, aren't you? You are carbonising the wood to get the really dark colour, so yeah, you will be getting the smoke. I very rarely get any. Just because I don't ever take the wood down to that level of carbonisation. I don't need it most of the time. Even the black of these eyes isn't carbonised. It's really dark brown. Kind of found that I can't really control it too much, and the shrinkage of the wood was when I go that dark is as far as carbonising it, that is something that I don't actually like. That the texture, it became when I was doing it, I was actually using the writing tip, the wire writing tip, this one, and it was it was too much sort of dotted holes almost for me. I just really didn't like it in compared with the rest of the piece. I was trying to do a leather jacket, and the bit I did was in the shade, and the really deep texture, actually it was on pine as well, but the really deep texturing with carbonising it down to try and get the black was in strong contrast to the rest of the piece. So although it looked okay, I wasn't really happy with it, and I haven't really ever gone that dark since. But the only time I get smoke these days is either demonstrating that paper doesn't sit on fire, so taking a piece like this and just burning through it, so I get smoke there, but no flames. Or of course, well, I'm here with cats, so occasionally a cat hair will come in contact, and then you get the burning hair smell rather than the burning wood smell. But generally the smell here is kind of more of warm wood on a hot day smell rather than burning wood smell. Now I need to just sort this eye out. I don't like this light area. Well, mind you, it's sort of there anyway. Let's join it up a little bit around here. Let's just play with a bit of colour just around here. There is a touch of white just in there, but I didn't want it actually as white as it was, so that's not too bad. I want to shade this colour out a little bit here. It's a bit abrupt, so I'm just going to try and soften off this edge. That's actually not too bad. Let's just bring it a bit closer to the edge of it, to his nose, like that, and soften this bottom edge off here like this. I'm doing exactly what I dislike other people doing. I'm just applying small amounts of heat, not in any given line. I'm just dotting it about, because what I want to do is avoid creating a line, because the lines stand out, and if you kind of just try and follow, just actually shade as you might try with a pencil to do this sort of movement, whilst you might get rid of this line, you've just created another one down here, and you end up chasing it down the piece. The way to do it is to just be fairly random and either dot or odd strokes just around the place of different lengths, so that you don't actually ever create a solid line, and then it just fades away a bit like that. You slightly see it's still on stream, so let's see if I can do something just to make that disappear. Where is it first of all? Because what's visible on stream isn't quite the same as what's visible. It's there, okay. Isn't quite the same as what's visible here. Okay, still showing up there on stream. It's extremely visible on stream. Just isn't here in person. So let's see if I can fix it without actually being able to see it, other than in the window from in the transmission window that I'm looking at. Which is challenging, because it's unlike a graphics tablet where the response is fairly quick. There's about a quarter of a second delay here between making the mark and seeing it in the preview. But there, we've seemed to have softened that edge off now there. Okay. Right, I want it to just soften this sharp edge off here that the hair is, and that's really just applying a little bit of texture, again randomly, just the edge. It's just small amount of heat relatively speaking, just a little bit of texture, a few dots about the place. It just sort of defocuses the edge is the best way of describing it, and your eye then doesn't pick up on a straight edge, or a clean straight edge, shall we say. I know it's not exactly straight, but it's curved, but the fact that it's not a fluffy edge is the best way perhaps of saying it. Your eye picks up on the fact that it's not fluffy and sees it as an anomaly. So it has now been fluffified. Okay, now I've got to watch. It's a bit light. I know it's salt and pepper around there, but salt and pepper that comes from salt and pepper beards, which is people who have white and grey hair in a dark beard. I just reuse the term for the pussycats. Nose is a bit narrow, but I'm not sure I actually want to do anything about it. It's a bit narrow compared to the actual image, and it's also at slightly the wrong angle. So what I'm going to do is just tilt the top of the nose, and I actually am probably carbonising the wood a little bit here, lizard soul, because I can smell that nice characteristic wood smell. It's kind of really weird, because I actually have almost a semi-allergic reaction to some smokes. Certainly cigarette smoke, but some smokes, and yet wood smoke does not bother me in the slightest. I quite enjoy the smell. Okay. Whilst I've made it darker, I need to just... It's not quite as smooth or as shiny as the rest, just in this top part of the nose here. So a little bit of work, just applying a little bit of pressure, so I'm sort of ironing it. Best way of describing it. Trying to just smooth it into the rest of the nose. That's as far as I'm going to take it, otherwise it's going to start to look a little bit odd. That. Still not happy here with the fairly rough textures, and I'm going to try and do is just iron them down a little bit. See if applying heat and a little bit of pressure will just squish them. And Lizard Soul, thank you very much for following that. Again, most kind of you for doing that. I thank you very much. It's been an interesting evening discussing pyrography with you, so I do look forward to doing it again, and I look forward, if you decide to do so, to seeing you broadcast some of your pyrography. I certainly would be interested in seeing the calligraphy and just how that's done. Okay, I think this sort of ironing, for want of a better description, sort of applying heat and pressing down, is working quite nicely here. Okay, the nose is going a bit more shiny, but yeah, I'm not overly concerned about that. The nose is, can seem that way. I think possibly I need to. I've got a really sharp edge again here. What I'm going to need to do is just extend the darker area just over the side here a little bit. Again, sort of, make a fluffy edge, so to speak. But do it. What I'm not doing here is pressing down. I am literally almost just touching it in order to apply heat and change the colour, but I don't actually want to squash the texture out, so I'm trying not to do it to a particular line. I'm just doing a random width almost, again to keep that fluffy edge, as it kind of rolls over the side of the nose is what I'm trying to do. I'm not going to be able to do the shading quite correct for that, but I think it's probably a little bit too overworked now. Is the wood around here? I'd probably have to take a scalpel and shave all the wood off, and I don't think I'd actually get as good a result. So ultimately, if I decide that nose just isn't going to be right, I'm probably looking at redoing the whole piece. So we shall see. You can get to a stage of the wood is just so worked that it just doesn't change colour or much in terms of texture. And the only way you've really got of correcting pyrography is by taking the surface off. It's not so bad if you're texturing the surface, although there is only so much surface to take off. I mean, if I run my fingers over there, I can feel where I scraped it off earlier. And the fact that scraping it does tend to smooth the surface of the wood, so that you get a different effect when you do run the tools back over it. For example, because the nose was scraped, running my tool over the nose created really a shiny, really smooth nose. And, so that's just something. It's not bad. I think probably I need to spread the colour out a little bit more here. It's probably a bit light. I know I was talking about wanting the salt and pepper effect that's down the side of his nose there, but I think probably the contrast is just a bit too much, which is making the edge of the nose look not quite as realistic. I thought the tool needed cleaning then, but it didn't. Yeah, it's looking better spreading the colour and making it slightly darker. Again, I'm just dotting it about. I want to try and keep that salt and pepper and the white streaks look that I see, but I do need the dark, the black streaks to be just a little bit darker. And that doesn't look too bad. Okay, now his chin itch is underneath. Let's go a little bit with artistic license. His chin is asymmetric. It's not quite all black, but we'll cheat. Normally, I always emphasise that you draw, paint, whatever, what you see, not what you think. But in this particular case, I'm diverting from that particular advice, in that I'm not actually doing what I think it should look like, but I'm not doing what it does look like, so I'm just making it up, so to speak. It will just give a slightly, in my opinion, it will give a slightly better look to the jaw and actually make it look as though you can see the whole of the bottom jaw really, or there's a full marking across there, especially when I fill in around it. Okay. Actually, I am reasonably pleased with that. I think I am seeing a texture, what I call a texture. I can see like a ring around here. It's where I've done a patch of texture and colouring. So here in person I'm seeing a ring. The edge of the area that I did. So I'm just now trying to lose that. So it's just like everywhere, like before, it's just softening off the edge, make it fluffified. Created a new word there for the stream, fluffified. So just disrupting the outline so that your eye cannot fix on the thing that it perceives. It often doesn't need much just to do that, and I've done enough there just to lose that, I think. There's a little, it's a little bit more shiny and a bit smooth than other areas of texture, and that's what's attracting my attention to it. So I've just broken that up, just applied a little bit more texture in the very shiny areas, and that's broken that up. There is some around here around the eyes, but that's okay. It's the fur around the eyes is a lot softer than elsewhere, and it does sometimes show up really shiny, so I'm okay with that. Perhaps again, I've just seen a line, so I'm just breaking up the line, fluffifying the edge again. Dear. Oh, I'm sorry, the stream froze. I've not actually dropped any frames, but yes, Twitch has been having a real problem all since Sunday, I think it was. I think on certainly times on Sunday and Monday. I think was it yesterday or the day before? I couldn't even watch my own stream. I was sending a picture without any problems whatsoever. Other people could see it, but I couldn't actually watch my own stream back at all. So I think they need to do something for certainly for the UK viewers. It seemed to be UK that was having the problem viewing streams. Okay, so I'm putting my tool down. I'm going to turn the pyro off because I've taken it as far as I want to do tonight. I've probably completed the majority of the face fur there. Any of the perceived lines that I've been able to see, there are a few small tiny ones that are not bothering me, but any of the perceived lines that I've been able to see, I've now disguised those. I've fluffified the edges. The bits that were overly smooth I've put more texture into so that it now looks better, in my opinion. So I have actually taken what was almost a throwaway piece on Monday into something which I am quite happy to take forward. I now have to decide just what my next move is going to be on here. We have black body fur, which is more of what I've been doing just in this sort of area here, a triangle here, which might be a good thing to do. There is fur on the ears here, which also would be an excellent thing to do. That's really fine fur, a bit like nose fur to do around the ears. They're really silky and smooth. There is of course the inner ears. Now there's no hair inside the ears on a cat. There's hair right at the entrance, which kind of creates a grill, a protection. I call them guard hairs. I half suspect they're there to stop things flying in, but they just come from the inner surface of this part of the ear literally out across the ears, like an iron bars on a window or something like that. But what I'm going to do with those is that they're predominantly sort of a whitish black. What I'm going to do is use flat shading inside their ears. So I'm not going to apply texture, but I am going to apply colouring. So like on Junior here, there is colouring which represents the internal structure of the ear and some of the highlights, which show up better in person than on stream. But you can see like white lighter areas inside, which is the actual structure of the ear. Do the same thing here on Felix in both of these ears, mainly in this one. And good evening, Mr. Pussycat. Junior has turned up. He's now sitting calmly and patiently off to one side, but within about 10 minutes, because he looks sleepy, he's either going to settle down or want to sit on my knee. So internal structure of the ears, and then once that's done, probably what I'll be doing is applying the guard hairs using a scalpel and actually scraping the colour away, which is exactly the same technique I used on Junior, and it actually looks quite realistic to do that. And I'll do that same thing as well with the whiskers, but that will be right at the end. Certainly the background needs to be coloured, because we've got white areas of the cat and we actually want them to show up lighter than the background. So like with Junior, there's a background colour to go in, and there is shading of the white fur around sort of here just underneath and around the bottom of the muzzle here. And possibly it looks a bit bright, so I may tone down the white anyway. That's around here. So those are the next jobs. Probably tackle the ears next, and that'll be on tomorrow's stream. But that will depend on just when I turn up on the stream, just how confident I am I'm going to be able to do them. They are one of the most daunting areas of the animal to do, is the inside of the ears. It was kind of terrifying when I did that one, but terrifying in sort of a just not confident way, as opposed to terrifying as running and screaming away sort of way. But I am otherwise pleased with that. So I am actually going to wind the stream up, Tilly and Lizard and anybody else who is listening. So thank you both for watching. And anybody who has followed me this evening, if Lizard and the gentleman who was before that, unfortunately I've forgotten who that was. I don't think he actually said hello in stream, but thank you for watching and for following me. It is most appreciated. It's great to know that people actually like to watch what it is that I'm doing, and want to continue doing so. So that's always wonderful to know. I should be back on tomorrow night. That's going to be approximately around 8 PM British Summer Time in the UK, which is 1900 GMT, or if you don't know what GMT is, wherever you are in the world at the moment now, count back 2 hours. And 2 hours ago was... or 2 hours in your time zone is 2 hours in my time zone, and that's when I would be starting tomorrow. Maybe a bit early, maybe a bit late. There's always a slight variation, but tend to stream at the moment 7 nights a week, always from about that time, for approximately 2 hours. Again, just depending on the work or what's going on at the time. So everybody, thank you very much. Good night, have a good evening, and hope to see you all again.